All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Monday, July 31st. This was the last trading day of the month, so I will dedicate a lot of this video to some of the themes that I've got written down here. Basically, another month is in the books. We're getting closer to the end of the year. I mean, what a year this has been so far. We've got 5 more months of the year to go. I'll talk a little bit about that. Today was kind of choppy price action. Sometimes month-end flows kind of dictate that. We'll talk about July surprises. I will go through the monthly performance. I did this for members yesterday with obviously just one more trading day of the month to go, but I'll recap that again and go into some detail about what really kind of stood out. And then ultimately, even though I'm going to talk about, areas that outperformed, and some of those areas you may or may not want to get involved in, depending on your trading system. Some traders only like to have a certain set of stocks that they watch, or a small focused watch list. Others are kind of more neutral and trade what's in front of them in terms of what areas are strong, and go with some of the rotation. So I will talk a little bit about that. Before we do, risks disclaimer in front of you: everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. So we'll start with today's performance really quickly. What stood out? The small caps really stood out. The breadth was strong basically all day today. So even though like the Qs actually, and I think the SPY made like a new low for the day, like right after 3 o'clock, there was buyers that stepped in. And again, I think that's just mainly just how month end works, is that it's whippy. Sometimes there could be some exposure or profit taking at the end of the month, or sometimes there's a little bit of a buy program. And I think we got the latter there. There's a bit of a buy program that washed through, but the breadth kind of gave us a little bit of a hint for the day, just as it did, going back to the last day where we saw volatility, which was Thursday, when the breadth was pretty weak throughout the session, even when the market was up in the morning, right? Breadth kind of gave us a little bit of a signal that things were not perfect for the day. All right. So let me go through. So that's the main performance. I mean, if you look at what also stood out today, was just that for the Qs, finishing basically flat, it just didn't feel like the performance was there, or momentum in some of the bigger cap tech today. In fact, it was more of your high short interest names, your smaller cap growth areas. Those did pretty well. And then there was also metals and mining did pretty well. Again, that was really, I thought, that something that was a theme of July as well, is that we really saw some strength from from both steel names, as well as things like copper miners and areas like that too. So again, really interesting month, and no doubt very interesting year. I mean, I think that this year has kept everybody on their toes. It's amazing that when we go through these different years, year by year in trading, there's been so many years that have been so different. I think in the last 5 years, that there's always things to kind of learn. I think that going back over the last 20 years or so, the last couple of years have just been really kind of unique and interesting, and bull markets, bear markets, a little bit of everything, and a lot of things that you could really learn from if you traded the last few years. This year, I would say one of the things that I think is kind of comical is really that no one knows what's going to happen. I mean, how many predictions did we hear in the beginning of the year? You know, one of the ones that resonated with me, not that it was right, but just the fact that everybody wanted to go long bonds in the beginning of the year. Not so much equities, but bonds were going to be, you know, this year's trade. That hasn't worked at all. And so, you know, price action is really important to kind of pay attention to. You know, going through charts and noticing what areas are really strong versus what areas are weak. You know, again, I'm kind of for some reason I feel like going through themes of the year, but you know, this has been more of a risk on year. You know, things like utilities and consumer staples and REITs, they have really lagged. I mean, this has been a full risk on year, even with short-term interest rates increasing. So I'm not going to go into any more of that because I feel like I could go on forever because it is interesting. I'm going to so just a couple quick charts that I'm going to take you through, and then we'll go through this month's performance. You know, here's S&P. So we're trying to resolve higher, right? There can be a lot of consolidation around a virgin point of control. Again, if you're not familiar with what a virgin point of control is, go to my pinned tweet on Twitter or X or whatever they're calling it these days, and you can bring up all the definitions, but it's where a lot of buyers and sellers have previously met up and we're returning back to. So we are trying to resolve higher. Notice that we have started the week above the value area, very different than where we were last week. And the Qs, right, just about the same. Not a lot of volatility in the Qs today, but they are also above the value area. Didn't really do too much. And, you know, sitting also just above that virgin point of control, that last takeout. Again, perfectly normal to see that, you know, a lot of consolidation when that happens, you know, and this is really interesting to me. One of the things that I said in my morning note on Substack, which you can subscribe to and get for free currently, but we had this bearish engulfing candle on Thursday, and Friday was just an inside day. So you know, the bottom line was we didn't break the trend, you know, or we did just for one day, but one day is not a trend, something that we really went over in last week's analysis. But, you know, even though this was just an inside day on Friday, we still held the 5-period moving average. And look at this, we're resolving higher. And this is going to be a big week for small caps. If we can stay above this 195.87, small caps are doing something different than they haven't been able to do so far this year, which is start to kind of break higher, right, out of this year's high and out of the value area for the year. Again, the value area for the year, just briefly, because I got a couple questions about this, it's based on all the activity from last year and basically putting one standard deviation around that volume and price action. Again, to me, this is much more important. I don't go over this in too many of these videos, but you know, why is this important? Well, because we're not fudging with trend lines. We're not fudging with, you know, anchoring VWAPs to where we think it's important, right? It is what it is, right? That's what's so unique and so important about you using value areas and using the TTG market webs, which is our own indicator. We don't change any of these levels. They are what they are. It's based on all the activity from last year. It's not going to change at all. Right. So it's not one of these things where you can fudge, you know, you can do that with an anchored VWAP, right? Because people do that all the time. I see them. Oh, now we're going to anchor the VWAP here, right? Well, it's going to give you a different result. We're not looking for different results. We're looking to be consistent, right? So that's why it's important, and we can make decisions based on that. All right. So so that's just the summary. And one other thing from earnings season that I just wanted to cover really quick. Now, I went long Roku on Friday. I like names when they have earnings, you know, especially names that have a little bit of short interest to them when they close and they have strong volume. Look at the continuation, up 7.4%. Now, this doesn't work every single time, but it's been working so far. Look at Boeing. Right? Boeing, I think, finished basically flat, but same thing with Boeing. Look at the high volume. Right? Look at how it closed on the absolute highs that day, right? Another name that was on fire today. This, I believe, has 20, according to FinViz, Bloomberg, I think the number was off, but the short interest is 20% of the float, right? Look at the volume. So same thing. I mean, maybe this name really takes off here. I mean, it certainly did today. This thing was up 50%. We were talking about it in the trading room at the end of the day when the stock was around 57, 58 bucks. And that was just around 3 o'clock. So I would, bottom line, I don't know, there's no 100% certainty that this name goes higher like Roku and Boeing did, but this is why we keep a list of earnings names that have high short interest, that basically have huge volume and close right around the highs. Right, these unexpected results and price action could cause institutions to kind of come in and have to start to accumulate the stock, and that pushes the name higher. So I just wanted to cover that really quickly. Let's get to the performance. So here's just a spreadsheet that I have, and I can of course sort it a couple different ways, but we have month to date. So SPY finished up, a nice healthy month for SPY, and the average is up 3%. I feel like they've just been chugging along most months, not every month so far in 2023, but a lot of months. And look at the performance of the small caps and the mid caps. Really outperformed. The diamonds had a good performance. Even the Qs, which, if you go through the sectors, there wasn't a ton of areas that I think in the Qs that really had, major outperformance, but we'll get to that. And then if you look at, so again, just a very high participation, not a lot of things down, right? Look at emerging markets. We're up 6% for the month, right? That's big. That's big outperformance for the month of July. And I just sent out this chart on Twitter. This is a 5-year chart of EEM versus SPY. So there's no major trend change here, but maybe something to kind of keep an eye on, right? You could see that we made a little bit of a higher low here, and maybe this is trying to kind of change its course, but it's very early to say that. But still, it's nice to see emerging markets have that participation. Bonds were down. You've heard me talk a lot about bonds. I won't do it in today's video because bonds were actually up today. So that kind of relieved some of the pressure that we saw from last week with higher yields. And that's what we kind of want to see if you're an equity investor for the rest of this year, is you don't really want to see, in my opinion, yields go much higher from where they are. Right? Again, we're talking long end of the curve. We're not talking about what the Fed does. Look at the equally weighted Qs and SPY. They both outperformed a bit over their market cap weighted ETFs. So interesting there. Value versus growth, both were pretty much in line with one another. And then here's where it gets even more interesting, and I highlighted a couple things. So this is basically more large cap value versus growth. If we go to small cap value versus growth, look at value actually turned in plus 7.4%. A very big month, and of course that comes down to some of the sectors that are on the top of the list. You've got things like the banks, which were up. Sorry, this is quarter. This is what we want to see, but still, I mean, most of the performance for the quarter was in this month of July, up 19% for both the regional banks as well as energy. That's a huge month. And I think it also just shows you that there wasn't a lot of exposure. I think a lot of people had been going towards tech, and when these things, and when crude started to move up, and the banks started to move up, they just had a monster month. So that's, why value versus growth went, some of the reasons why value outperformed. And even look at the ARK innovation, right? So again, like there's a lot of things that are kind of different, right? As I mentioned with the Qs were up, about 3.9%, but look at the ARK innovation names, right? These are a lot of names that have been beaten up. Really a lot of names still coming off their lows pretty aggressively, up 14%, that ETF. And it's kind of crazy when you look at this ETF, right? It is still, if you zoom out here, I mean, this is just, it's really, if you go back to where it was, September, I think this is September of last year. It's basically hasn't really done, I don't think it's taken out those highs yet. So again, we're really talking, it's important to kind of put that performance in context, is that this is still massively underperforming for, when you go outside of this year, basically. All right. So let me keep going. I don't want to go, I don't want to talk too much about ARC. I want to go into these sectors, but yeah, so one of the things that I said in the beginning of this video is, are you content with, sitting with some areas that have been leaders so far this year and waiting for them to kind of come back a little bit? Why do I say that? Well, because if you look at the robotic stocks, right, and AI stocks, which again has been a big theme, has gotten a whole lot of attention, but in the month of July, that's not where the really alpha was. That's not what the major performance was. That group was only still up, was up for the month, up 1%. But all in all, struggled compared. It's tough to say something struggled when it was up for the month, but when you, in relation to some other areas of the market, there's many better opportunities for that in the month. And again, looking at some of these groups, the next one we'll talk a little bit about, which I covered in Friday's video quite a bit, was the Chinese Internet ETF, was up 18%. Right, a couple other things that stood out. Right, the self-driving ETF or automation type tech EV plays were up 11.6%. That's huge outperformance. Steel names, which we talked a little bit about, up 10%. These are big months. For some reason, I have clean energy in here twice, but that was up 8.6%. So again, both traditional and clean energy stocks doing very well. The internet stocks did very, very well as well, up 6.6%. Right. And then if we kind of go further down to the underperformers, healthcare, which came alive for about a week, but healthcare and biotech also just can't seem to really get going yet. And we'll keep an eye on both of those. But for now, not really great performances. Defense and aerospace, that was only up 1% this month. So again, also underperforming. And then medical devices, which started to kind of move a little bit after Abbott reported earnings, has kind of lost a lot of that momentum from recently. And then solar stocks have been an underperforming area. Now, I don't have every group on here. There's probably some areas that I'm leaving out, but I think that's a good summary for the month, right? And where, going back to some of my original themes here, figuring out basically in your trading system, if you're going after some of these areas that money is getting rotated into, or if you're going to just basically look at the same stocks, in NVIDIA and SMCI, right? There's nothing wrong with that too. Provided that those names hold trend. The semiconductors, how did the semis do this month? Pretty good, up 5.5%. They've had periods where they haven't really moved too, right? So in any event, that's the summary for this month. We do this kind of summary at the end of every month and quarter, and it makes sense to kind of reflect and go through where the performance is. And then finally, I put out my performance for members. I put it out on Twitter every month, which I'll be doing shortly. I had an okay month. I'm now up 33% year to date in my trading account. And I'll review, the details of that for members. But, all in all, going through this performance, a lot of opportunities, but it's tough to kind of capture all of these. There's certain times of this month where I didn't execute as well as I should have. For example, I was in some trades that I had a stop price, got stopped out in, and, those names like rallied either the next day or a couple days later. So that still made this month a little bit challenging. But all in all, I'm not going to complain with a nice positive month and increasing where I'm at year to date. So I'll have that video out for members a bit later, and I'll try to send out those results on Twitter, because I do that at the end of every month. And I would encourage you, if you are subscribing to somebody's service, such as myself, and by the way, you can get involved in our membership and see what it's like with you could use the coupon code TTG 2023. You go to tribecatradegroup.com. But everybody who runs a service, in my opinion, should be putting out their performance or telling you how their trade ideas did. This is not hypotheticals, right? This is we trade with real money, and we show our results. All right, guys, that is it for today's video. Have a great night, and on to the next month. No matter what you did for this month, right? It's important to stay focused on the road ahead and the challenges in front of you instead of behind you. So if you executed wonderfully in July and so far this year, congratulations. But your next job is to have a nice positive month for the month of August and try to outperform, and vice versa. If you did not have a great month in July, figure out what some of your mistakes were, some of the things that you could improve on. So this way you can line yourself up with, achieving your goals for the month of August. All right, guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.